In just 37 seconds, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors told a daytime talk show host to back off, threw his microphone across the stage, and stormed out while cameras were still rolling. What started as a conversation about Samuel L. Jackson's legendary career turned into a full-blown war of words that nobody saw coming, with Tamron Hall pushing buttons she had no business pushing, leading to the most explosive exit in daytime television history. Before we get into this absolute mess, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the moments that make celebrities snap. Don't miss out on the chaos. Last night's episode of Tamron Hall was supposed to celebrate Samuel L. Jackson's 5 decades in entertainment. The legendary actor walked onto that stage with his trademark cool confidence, wearing a sharp black suit and his signature Kangol hat. The audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted almost a minute. Samuel smiled, waved, and sat down in the guest chair across from Tamron, who was beaming like she had just landed the interview of the year. Little did anyone know that within 20 minutes, this whole thing would blow up in the most spectacular way possible. Tamron started off friendly enough, talking about Samuel's latest projects and his incredible journey from struggling theater actor to one of the highest-grossing stars of all time. Samuel was relaxed, telling stories about working with Quentin Tarantino, sharing behind-the-scenes moments from the Marvel films, and making the audience laugh with his characteristic wit. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The energy in the studio was light and fun. But then Tamron decided to shift gears, and that's when you could feel the temperature in the room start to change. "Samuel, I want to talk about something that's been in the news lately," Tamron said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "There's been a lot of discussion about older actors in Hollywood, and whether they should step aside to make room for younger talent. Some people are saying that actors over 60 should consider retirement to give the next generation a chance. What do you think about that?" Samuel's smile faded just a little bit. He leaned back in his chair and looked at Tamron with a raised eyebrow. "Well, that's an interesting way to phrase it," he said slowly. "Are you asking me if I think I'm too old to act?" Tamron laughed, but it sounded forced. No. I'm just asking about the broader conversation happening in the industry right now." "The broader conversation," Samuel repeated, nodding. "Right. Well, here's what I think about that broader conversation. It's some bullshit. Excuse my language, but it is. Acting isn't about age. It's about talent, experience, and whether you can still do the work. I can still do the work. Better than most people half my age, actually." The audience clapped and cheered at that, but Tamron wasn't letting it go. "Of course you can," she said quickly. "But don't you think there's something to be said about making space for new voices? Younger actors who are struggling to get opportunities because the same big names keep taking all the major roles?" Samuel's expression hardened. "Younger actors need to earn their opportunities, just like I did. Just like everyone in my generation did. Nobody handed me anything. I worked my ass off for 30 years before I became a household name. I did theater. I did tiny roles. I struggled. I paid my dues. If young actors today think they deserve to skip all that and jump straight to the top just because some blog says it's their turn, they're in for a rude awakening." You could feel the tension building now. Tamron shifted in her seat, and her smile had become tighter. "I hear what you're saying, but isn't that a bit dismissive of the very real challenges that young actors face today? The industry has changed. It's harder now than it was when you were coming up." "Harder?" Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Harder? Let me tell you something about hard. When I was trying to make it, I was living in a tiny apartment with 4 other people, working 3 jobs just to afford acting classes. I went to auditions where they told me I wasn't right because of how I looked, how I talked, where I came from. I faced actual discrimination, real barriers, and I kept going. So don't tell me about hard." Tamron's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to diminish your experience, Samuel. I'm just saying that perhaps there's room for both perspectives here. Maybe the industry could benefit from some of the established stars taking a step back." "Taking a step back," Samuel said, his voice getting sharper. "You keep dancing around what you really want to ask me, Tamron. Why don't you just come out and say it? You think I'm too old. You think I should retire. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" The studio went dead quiet. Tamron's smile disappeared completely. "That's not what I said, but it's what you meant," Samuel shot back. "I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's trying to ease into an insult. You bring me on your show, you act all excited to have me here, and then you spend half the interview suggesting I should quit. What kind of respect is that?" Tamron sat up straighter, and now there was an edge in her voice too. "Samuel, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I'm asking you about an industry-wide conversation. I'm not personally attacking you." "It sure feels like a personal attack," Samuel said. "You didn't ask me about my craft. You didn't ask me about what drives me or what I still want to accomplish. You asked me if I think I should stop doing what I love because some people think my generation is taking up too much space. How is that not personal?" The audience was completely silent now, looking back and forth between Tamron and Samuel like they were watching a tennis match. Tamron took a breath, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "I apologize if my question came across the wrong way. That wasn't my intention. But I do think it's a valid topic of discussion." "Valid for who?" Samuel asked. "Valid for you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're the one with the problem. Maybe you think daytime TV would be better without people like me showing up. Maybe you'd prefer to have some young influencer sitting here instead. Someone who won't challenge you or call you out when you cross a line." Tamron's face flushed. "That's completely unfair, Samuel. I've always respected you and your work. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" Samuel leaned forward. "Because right now it doesn't feel like respect. Right now it feels like you brought me here to make a point. Like you wanted to have this conversation about age and retirement, and you figured you could use me as your example. Well, I'm not your example. I'm not here to be your talking point." Tamron was visibly frustrated now, her professional composure starting to crack. "You're twisting my words. I never said any of that. I asked you a simple question about a topic that's relevant in Hollywood right now, and you're acting like I've personally offended you." "You have personally offended me," Samuel said, his voice rising. "You invited me onto your show under the pretense of celebrating my career, and instead you're questioning whether I should even still have one. How is that not offensive?" The producer could be seen off camera making cutting motions with his hand, trying to signal Tamron to move on to something else. But she ignored him. "Samuel, I think you're being overly sensitive about this. It was just a question." That's when things really exploded. Samuel stood up from his chair, and the sudden movement made Tamron flinch. "Overly sensitive?" he said, his voice booming through the studio. "I'm being overly sensitive because I don't appreciate being disrespected on national television. Is that what you're telling me?" Tamron stood up too, which was a mistake. "I didn't disrespect you. You're choosing to take it that way." "I'm choosing?" Samuel's voice was incredulous. "You're really going to stand there and tell me how I should feel about your questions? You're going to tell me what is and isn't disrespectful to me?" "I'm saying that you're overreacting," Tamron said, and immediately you could see her regret saying it. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Samuel stared at her for a long moment. "Overreacting," he said quietly, which was somehow scarier than when he was yelling. "Let me tell you something, Tamron. I've been in this industry for 50 years. I've worked with the best directors in the world. I've been nominated for awards. I've broken records. I've inspired generations of actors. And I'm going to stand here on your little talk show and let you tell me I'm overreacting? I don't think so." Tamron crossed her arms. "Samuel, I understand you're upset, but I think we need to take a breath here and calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," Samuel said sharply. "That's the oldest trick in the book. You say something that pisses someone off, and then when they react, you tell them to calm down like they're the problem. I know that game. I'm not playing it." The audience was completely frozen. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were looking around like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this absolute disaster. Tamron's professionalism was completely gone now. "You know what, Samuel? Maybe if you weren't so defensive, we could have an actual conversation about this. But clearly, you're not interested in that." "Defensive?" Samuel laughed bitterly. "I'm defensive because I'm defending myself. That's what the word means. And I wouldn't have to defend myself if you hadn't attacked me in the first place." "I didn't attack you," Tamron insisted. her voice getting louder. "All I did was ask a question that made you uncomfortable. And instead of engaging with it like an adult, you're throwing a tantrum." The gasps from the audience were audible. Samuel's eyes went wide. "A tantrum? Did you just say I'm throwing a tantrum?" Tamron seemed to realize she had gone too far, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I'm just saying that your reaction seems disproportionate to what I actually asked." Samuel reached up and unclipped his microphone from his lapel. "You know what, Tamron? I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly didn't do her homework and doesn't understand what she's talking about. You want to have conversations about age in Hollywood? Fine. But do it with someone else. Because I'm done." "Samuel, wait," Tamron said. But her tone was more angry than apologetic. "You can't just walk off my show." "Watch me," Samuel said. He balled up his microphone cord and tossed the whole thing onto his chair. "I've walked off better sets than this. Your show isn't special. And frankly, neither are you." Tamron's face went bright red. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" "I'm Samuel L. Jackson," he said, turning back to face her. "And I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else. I came here as a courtesy, thinking this would be a nice conversation. Instead, you tried to ambush me with loaded questions, and then acted like I was the bad guy for calling you out. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just lazy and disrespectful." "You don't get to come on my show and insult me," Tamron shot back. "This is my stage. These are my cameras. You're a guest here, and you need to remember that." Samuel looked at her like she had just said the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. "Your stage? Your cameras? Lady, I've been on more stages and in front of more cameras than you've probably ever seen. Your little daytime show isn't some sacred ground. It's just another gig, and right now, it's a gig I want nothing to do with." The producers were frantically trying to cut to commercial, but Tamron waved them off. She was too caught up in the argument to care about damage control. "If you leave now, you're proving everyone right who says you can't handle criticism. You're proving that you're just an angry old man who can't adapt to how things are changing." That was the final straw. Samuel's expression went ice cold. "An angry old man," he repeated slowly. "Wow, you really went there. You know what's funny? Everything you're accusing me of being? That's exactly what you're acting like right now. You're so caught up in trying to make your point that you can't see how badly you're coming across. You're so desperate to be right that you're willing to insult your guest on live television. And you want to talk about professionalism?" Tamron opened her mouth to respond, but Samuel held up his hand. "No, I'm done listening to you. I gave you plenty of chances to back off and be respectful, and you chose not to take any of them. So now I'm making the choice for both of us. I'm leaving." "Fine," Tamron snapped. "Leave. I don't need you here anyway. We'll find someone else who actually wants to have a real conversation." Samuel laughed one more time, shaking his head. "Good luck with that. Maybe try treating your guests with some basic human decency. You might get better results." He turned and started walking toward the exit. Tamron called after him. "You're making a huge mistake, Samuel. Walking off my show like this? People are going to hear about this. This is going to be everywhere." Samuel stopped at the edge of the stage and looked back over his shoulder. "Let them hear about it. Let it be everywhere. Because when people watch this back, they're going to see exactly what happened here. They're going to see you trying to push an agenda, and they're going to see me refusing to go along with it. And you know what? I'm fine with that. I'd rather walk off your show with my dignity intact than sit here and let you disrespect me for entertainment." Tamron was shaking now. Whether from anger or embarrassment or both, it was hard to tell. "Get out then. Just get out." "Already gone," Samuel said, and he walked off the stage without looking back. The audience sat in stunned silence. Tamron stood there alone, her chest heaving, staring at the empty space where Samuel had been sitting just moments before. The cameras were still rolling, capturing her shocked expression and the absolute chaos of what had just happened. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The whole studio felt like it was holding its breath. Finally, one of the producers yelled, "Cut!" and the lights changed. But it was too late. The damage was done. Samuel L. Jackson had just walked off Tamron Hall's show in the middle of a live taping, and everyone had witnessed the explosive argument that led to it. The confrontation had gone from zero to nuclear in a matter of minutes, and there was no way to undo it. Behind the scenes, you could hear raised voices as production staff scrambled to figure out what to do next. Audience members were whispering to each other, phones already out, some of them recording what they had just seen. Tamron finally sat back down in her chair, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to compose herself. But composure was impossible. She had just pushed one of Hollywood's biggest stars too far, and he had called her bluff in the most dramatic way possible. Samuel was already out of the building by the time security even realized what had happened. He didn't stop to talk to anyone, didn't pause to explain himself. He had said everything he needed to say on that stage. His point was made, his boundaries were drawn, and he had walked away on his own terms. The car that had brought him to the studio was still waiting outside, and he climbed in without a word, his jaw set, his eyes forward. Back inside the studio, Tamron was trying to salvage what was left of the episode, but her energy was completely off. The remaining segments felt hollow and awkward. The audience wasn't paying attention anymore. They were still processing what they had just witnessed. Some of them looked uncomfortable, like they felt bad for being there. Others looked excited, like they couldn't wait to tell people about the crazy thing they had just seen live. When the taping finally ended, Tamron immediately left the stage without her usual goodbye to the audience. She went straight to her dressing room and closed the door. Through the walls, people could hear her on the phone, her voice loud and stressed. The entire crew was buzzing with energy, everyone talking at once about what had just happened and what it meant for the show. Samuel's publicist's phone was already blowing up with calls from journalists wanting a statement. Samuel himself was in the back of his car, looking out the window at the city passing by. He didn't feel angry anymore. He just felt tired. Tired of the disrespect. Tired of having to justify his existence in an industry he had given his life to. Tired of people like Tamron Hall, who thought they could build their credibility by tearing down legends. The footage of the confrontation started leaking online within hours. Clips of Samuel standing up, of him unclipping his microphone, of Tamron calling his reaction a tantrum. All of it spread across social media like wildfire. People were taking sides immediately. Some defended Samuel, saying Tamron had been out of line from the start. Others said he had overreacted and should have handled it better. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was the most explosive talk show moment in years. The video ended with Samuel walking off that stage, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness beyond the cameras, leaving Tamron standing alone in the spotlight she had created. It was a moment that would define both of their careers in different ways. For Samuel, it was another example of him refusing to compromise his principles. For Tamron, it was a harsh lesson in what happens when you underestimate your guest and push too hard. The show would go on, but it would never be quite the same after that night. And Samuel? He had already moved on, ready for his next project, unbothered by the chaos he had left behind.